We are back living the authentic life, and I am so excited to have Khara Breeden as our guest today. She is the founder and CEO,
correct,
of Texas Forensic Nurses, and we just held the most incredible fundraising event with Christy Lynn, with Madame Zero last week, and we were really able to learn so much more about your needs in helping victims of domestic violence, of trafficking, of all sorts of abuse. And I just can't thank you enough for what you do for the community.
Oh, it's an honor. And I'm just still dreaming about the event last week. It was so good. It was just so beautiful, and I'm so thankful.
So I have to start with an apology because you are Dr. Khara Breeden, and I did not properly introduce you
fine.
last week, and I wanted to make a big deal about it this week because we've got to raise up girl bosses that go through that effort to get that DR in front of their name.
I don't make a big deal about it, so it's totally fine. Yes.
But it is a big deal.
Yeah, we should. I agree with you. If I was talking to somebody else, I would say the same thing. I think it's when it's yourself.
I know, you're like, I feel humble about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you, a doctorate in nursing?
I have a doctorate of nursing practice, which I kind of explain it like a PhD. Everybody kind of knows what a PhD is. They're really focused on research and doing research projects and that sort of thing. And DNP is more focused on clinical change. And so really I took my DNP, actually graduated right and kind of went into figuring out how to launch TXFNE. But really that's what it's focused on.
That's an acronym for Texas
Forensic Nurse Examiners.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But really it's focused on clinical change, and what a way to make clinical change but to create a community-based program. So I really took that kind of education and kind of pushed it out and created a whole different place for victims to be victims to be cared for in this community. So that's how I am utilizing my education, I suppose.
It's so amazing. And you've had a number of years as a nurse. How long have you been a nurse?
I have been a nurse since 2002. 2002,
okay.
Yeah.
So over 20 years.
Yeah.
And what drew you to nursing initially?
I kind of came from a medical background. My mom's a nurse. My dad was a physician. I kind of felt like it was what I was supposed to do. Very honestly, I got pregnant very young. I was 17 when I got pregnant. I was 18 when I had my first child, and I needed to be able to provide. And so at the time, you could get, and you still can, you could get an associate's degree in nursing, and a few years. And so for me, it was like, okay, this is a way I can, make a decent living and be able to provide for my kiddo and all of that. So I kind of went on a path, one, because I think it was probably my calling anyway, but two, it kind of fit for my circumstances, and it's been such a great decision for me. And my daughter's now a nurse. The child I had when I was 18, she's a nurse. She's actually my clinical director, Brookley. You met her at the event.
How did I not put that together, girl? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
So do you not tell everyone she's your daughter?
We don't right away. She's better about it than we used to be. She used to be kind of like, didn't really want people to know. She kind of wanted to earn her own keep because she's like amazing in her own right, and she's like, I could not do it without her. So she used to be a little bit more cautious about letting like the general public know. But she's gotten better with age, and I think confidence in her own space, and she's great, and it's awesome. So she's a nurse. My husband's a nurse. My mom's a nurse. My mom also works with us. So it's all big family love nursing thing going on. So it's fun.
So love that. So I was telling you before we started recording, I had a 22-year career working with my family. Yeah. And there's no one you trust more. There's no one you can count on more, but there's no one that makes you more angry. When you come from an Italian family, my dad's name is Vito Cangelosi. So that kind of gives you an idea. Love you, Dad, but your temper's kind of hard to live under. So it's great, but it's hard. Like even me and Rob, like there's never a moment that it's not part of our journey. Right. But as someone like who founded this organization and who's running it, it is your passion. There's no delineation between when you're working and when you're not working.
Right.
It seems to be so constant, and there is such a need. Everyone out there watching probably knows that fighting sex trafficking and helping traffic victims is my biggest passion. And I just felt so connected to your journey because I spent so much time in my life as a younger person growing up with this opinion of what right and wrong was, that I looked at people who made decisions to be prostitutes or to be addicted to drugs and live in the street and live this life with judgment. And I've realized now that you should look at it with a heart of discernment and concern and empathy for their journey, because many of them chose this life or had this life chosen for them or were prostituted as opposed to really chose to say, when I grow up, I want to be paid for sex.
Right.
And
who does that?
Yeah. And so it's been a real evolution for me. And to see that when these girls come out of these situations, that they've been so brainwashed that they're not begging for help and saving, that they believe this is their new reality.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that journey of the survivors, the victims.
Well, I want to just say, because I love that you said that first, because I think when I even started in my forensic nursing space, so I'd already been a nurse for 10 plus years, and I think this is very common in the general public, right? I think we all assume we start from the same place.
Exactly.
And I think so this is me. I had been a forensic nurse for about a year. I still was kind of understanding the space. I was still fairly green. And I remember it was a night I had 2 or 3 patients kind of back to back. I was working at the county hospital here in Harris County, and I had to travel from one hospital to another to come see a patient. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went to go into this room. I had another patient waiting on me back at the other hospital, right? So I'm kind of flustered, kind of tired, and the patient wasn't in her room. And so I asked the nurse, I'm like, do you know where she went? And she's like, oh, I think she went out to smoke. And I was like, so annoyed, right?
Right.
And so here she comes. She comes back in the room. I'm already like, she had been... I'd already been told by the nurse that it was something related to prostitution, right? So I already had formulated this thought in my head. So I'm doing her exam. I walk in, and she had this, I don't want to be like too detailed here, but graphic, but she had like a dried substance on her neck and on her chest, which was, I don't know if you want me to say.
Yes.
Yeah. It was dried ejaculate, essentially, is what it was.
Wow. Okay.
And so I was like, okay. So I walk in, and she tells me her story, which was very traumatic. And I always really tried to get to know my patients, right? That's what we do as nurses. And so after kind of the exam was done and we were kind of finishing up, I said to her, I said, how did you get to this place? How did you start doing this? And she said, well, when I was 9, my mom used to make me have sex for money so that she could, provide food for the other kids in the house. And so this is her life. She was now 18, 19. And this is something she started doing because she was forced to when she was 9. So we expect this person to be able to change. How does that change? How does she start at the same place as you and me? That's not the same place. It never will be the same place. And it was so eye-opening for me. And I talk about that, especially when we talk about bias, right? Because we have these thoughts, and we think people should be able to overcome this or do that or respond this way or all of these things. And that was just such a moment for me in my forensic nursing career that from that point on, I was like, okay, we're not all the same. We don't start in the same place. We all have these are these challenges that certain individuals, unfortunately, that's their normal life. And so anyway, it was very profound.
But I'm glad
me.
that you shared like the way that she looked and what had happened, because someone that has left that on them, it's almost as though it was so traumatic, but also so normal that she didn't even think that there should be shame to wipe it off, or like there's not a normal thought process. And we have to realize, because there's been so much trauma that they've experienced, that their normal is just so different.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's occurred to me is their addiction is a way of coping and masking. And I know when I get home after a hard day, I want a glass of wine. And if you are raped throughout the day multiple times and you are addicted to certain drugs, you're going to want that drug to numb the pain.
Right.
And their hard day is much different than our hard day.
Yeah.
And it's such a cycle that they oftentimes don't have other skills to get out of, which is another part of what...
Well, and maybe where they went or came from, maybe that was worse.
Exactly.
You know, I think that's something that we all just assume, that this space that they're in, you know, whether they're being trafficked or whatever that, you know, relationship is, whatever that situation is, the other may be worse, right? And so I think it's hard for us to take in, because and as we sit here and think about it, like what could be worse than that? But likely it was, you know.
And so many of these people that are trafficked as immigrants are promised a different life and are not brought over saying you're going to be in servitude as a sex slave, in essence, but you're going to come over and you're going to be a nanny. Yeah. And you're going to do these other things. And then they're told if they don't do what they want to do, what the traffickers want them to do, then their families will be injured. And I remember listening to Sarah Smart. She was the young girl, I believe, in Utah that was abducted, and people would even walk up to her and ask, "Are you Sarah Smart?" And she would say no, because they had told her. And there's something that happens to your brain too, and I think that's part of it. And what I really latched onto emotionally was that you guys are the first line after they're brought in. Well, maybe it's a policeman who has a sidearm, who has a uniform, who they've been taught is the enemy. Yeah. Even though maybe they're not, maybe some are. But then they meet your nurses. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what happens.
So many times we see them in a variety of settings. Many times our patients show up in our hospital partnered locations, but sometimes depending on the situation, law enforcement, we work with them really closely. Sometimes they're able to come to our office setting, which is even better. A lot of our girls that we, are feeling like maybe trafficked, a lot of them will come to our office. We know that space is better than a hospital. It's not as loud. The lights aren't quite as bright and glaring. We have food, we have blankets, we have all these things that we can kind of offer them in that space. So a lot of our law enforcement, we work so closely with them that they know they can call us, they can bring them there. So a lot of those girls come there. So really and truly, we work with our advocacy partners really closely. So usually they're there the moment that they come in as well. So we have lots of arms around them is kind of how we want to make sure that they feel supported in every way. So they'll come in and then we just do a thorough assessment. We're checking for injuries. We look for different disease processes. Sometimes, again, like you said, they might not feel like they're victims, right? They might not feel like they're being trafficked. They might feel like they're doing this all on their own accord, that they're making their own decisions. And so they don't necessarily feel like they need evidence collection because they don't feel like they've been involved in any type of anything that was wrong, right? But they are usually interested in, being assessed for sexually transmitted infections, pregnancy, talking about some of those health-related issues. And for us, it's really a way to kind of be able to extend our hand to them, and that way they know we're a safe space. And we have a lot of people that will come back. They'll know that we're a safe place. If we do lab testing and maybe they do have some type of sexually transmitted infection, a lot of them will come back for treatment to us. So I think we create an environment that allows them to know, like, maybe I'm not ready to leave this situation today, but I know that at some point, at least this is a safe place I can come back to. And we've had that happen. We've had people show up at our door.
Just not knowing and not feeling like they were ready to go to the police, but they wanted someone to talk to.
Right.
Because I was shocked when you were talking about strangulation statistics and domestic violence in Houston. Will you share some of that?
Are you talking about domestic violence homicide?
Yes.
Yeah. So Harris County, unfortunately, and I don't know last year's statistics, I would have to pull that number, but TCFV, which is TCFV, family violence. I can't remember what the TC stands for. Anyway, they're the statewide organization that focuses on domestic violence, but they do a report every year, and they actually will publish all the counties and how many domestic violence related homicides were reported. And year after year, Harris County has been number one. And so we're very large. So some of that is just because of our size and our population and all that. But it also says a lot about, the crime that's happening in this general area. And so we know that strangulation is a precursor to homicide. Once a woman's been strangled in a relationship, they're 7.5 times more likely to be killed in that relationship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 43% of women that are killed by their partner have been strangled the year before, so sometime in that relationship. So we know that there is a very large significance between strangulation and domestic violence homicide. So we really treat it as, a very potentially lethal form of violence. Our staff are all very well trained in how to do a thorough strangulation assessment, looking for injuries and documenting those types of things. Being able to talk about that and throughout the criminal justice system becomes really important. Teaching law enforcement so that when they're on scene, they are documenting and asking the right questions as well. So we do a lot of work in that space just to make sure that all of our partners know that the potential seriousness of something like strangulation is something we have to be focused on.
And we've had Assistant DA Jonna Stallings on, and we've talked to her, and I know you guys work real closely together. You're also able to help the victims in court and speak on their behalf, because there is so much trauma to have to retell your story so many times.
Right.
And I've never really thought about that. But it is so much, it takes so much emotion.
Right.
And when you say it the first time, then you might eventually come back off of what you shared because you have fear, or you feel guilty, or you feel that you deserved it, even worse.
Yeah. So part of our exam, we call it our history. And so we say that our history is taken for the purpose of diagnosis and treatment. So again, staying in our medical space, it really helps us understand what that patient kind of went through, what the potential, what are we looking for? It helps us really nail down our assessment. But that history becomes really helpful in court, because generally we're doing that in an acute phase of trauma, right? And so our staff do a history, and we write down every word verbatim. And so every word that patient says to us during that history portion of the exam is written down just exactly like they say it. We generally will write down, in brackets, like maybe if they begin crying, or if they have certain body movements, or if they are fidgeting with things, just so that whenever we read it in the courtroom setting, it really feels like that. We want that jury to be able to feel like they're there and they understand what that survivor went through. So that's that history portion. It becomes really important in the criminal justice system. For us medically, it's hugely important because it helps us do a thorough exam, but it's kind of a twofold in the importance of doing that.
So before you were working with law enforcement, what would happen when domestic violence happened, or when somebody was taken out of a brothel or a sting operation?
So before we existed, they had to go to a hospital system. In Harris County, before we existed, the only locations you could really have a domestic violence focused exam was at Ben Taub and LBJ, the county hospital system, which is fabulous. They have a great nursing team.
But environment?
Right. It's chaotic, right? And so
you're with gunshot victims. And
so really that was it. So that was one of our big focuses, is really making sure that, domestic violence survivors especially had more options after they have been through such a traumatic event. Same thing with trafficking. I think, before we launched, there was maybe 8 to 10 locations that patients could go to get a sexual assault exam throughout this region. And then we've just really tried to expand that and then give alternate environments of, our clinic space, or some of our women's centers have clinic spaces within them, so we can go, like the Bridge Over Troubled Waters, for example. We have a clinic within that women's center shelter. So we can take victims there, do a medical forensic exam there. Maybe that's someplace they feel more comfortable. Maybe it's closer to them, whatnot. So we just really try to give options, right? We need to be able to give them options. What's close? What's in your community? Where do you feel comfortable? Where do you feel safe? So that's really what we've focused on.
So let's talk about some of your collaboration partners, because actually I joined St. Luke's Friends of Nursing because you guys were working with St. Luke's, and I think, but you have a lot of different hospitals, and you're actually expanding to the Rio Grande Valley. So let's talk about, like, how does that work? Do you train there? Do you have to have people? Like, what is the process?
So partner-wise or expansion-wise?
We'll talk partners first. Too many questions altogether.
No, it's okay.
So excited about it all.
Partners. We have a lot of amazing partners, a lot of community partners like the Bridge and Hawk and all of these. They're all amazing.
Missionary Women's Center.
Yes. The Landing, all of these. I don't want to forget anyone. So there's many partners. But as far as hospital partners, CHI St. Luke's, they'll always be very special to me, because they are the ones that gave me our first hospital MOU contract. And so they're the first ones that kind of believed in giving me a chance. And really and truly, this is kind of, once I showed one hospital that I could actually do this, I think others...
You have to prove it.
Others just thought I had this wild idea that couldn't really happen. So once I could, kind of prove that we could actually get this done, I think others bought in, and it's been kind of like growth ever since. So CHI will always have a really special place to me. But then, like, HCA is one of our partners. They have quite a few locations in this region, but we have a lot of other smaller systems. MD Anderson's obviously not small, but they wanted to make sure their system was covered. Oak Bend and Fort Bend County is covered. We have lots of freestandings, like patients out in ER in Baytown. Like, we just have a lot of these people that are like, hey, we want to make sure these victims are covered no matter what. And so hospitals...
So you would send someone there when they had a patient, or you would train the nurses how to help when they're...
So a lot of times it's patients show up. They show up where they're comfortable. And so our goal has always been to make sure that every location has services, so that when a patient shows up, they don't have to get turned away. They don't have to get transferred. The ER staff doesn't have to worry about how they're going to take care of this patient. So our goal has always been to, wherever this patient shows up, you're covered because you have this service through us. And so that's really been our focus with our hospital partners, is just, hey, we can do this. Let's get this MOU. If you need us, call us. Some of the locations, we'll get a call from a patient, maybe just because they found us on Google and they live in a specific area. Well, I can look on our map and say, okay, this is our closest partnered location to you. And so sometimes we'll direct them to that closest location. But a lot of times it's just them, patients showing up to whatever hospital that they feel most comfortable with in their community. So there's that. Expansion-wise, very exciting.
How do you choose that as the next place?
Well, our Rio Grande Valley was really chosen. Long story short, because there's a college campus there, University of Texas in Rio Grande Valley, and they had a grant that was really focused on expanding forensic nursing services for their college campus students that were impacted by violence, but really in the community in general, expanding services. So until we launched in Rio Grande Valley in January, there was one hospital in Hidalgo County and one in Cameron County that were conducting exams. So for a size, for county region that size, that's just not enough locations. So patients were
having an immigration path?
Oh, for sure. For sure, they're right on the border. So there's lots of high risk trafficking stuff. There's a lot of those high risk things for sure in that region. So really, we wanted to, again, the goal is always wherever a patient might show up, that place will be covered with services. So we started having conversations with our HCA partners here in Houston, because it's actually part of the same region. They are the Gulf Coast region.
Okay, got it.
So they actually covered those hospitals in Rio Grande Valley as well. So it was a pretty easy conversation, like, hey, can we expand here? I'll hire staff for down there, and this is how that will work. And they were on board right away and have been amazing partners down there. So it's been really fun. And then we just got a second hospital partner down in Rio Grande Valley called South Texas Health System, and that gave us 9 more locations. So we now have 14 hospitals in the Rio Grande Valley that we're covering. So again, growth is just a continuous in that regard, because again, hospitals want to be able to take care of the patients that show up to their hospitals no matter what. And we're expanding to Dallas in July.
Well, and that's what we also work with demand disruption, and we had a junior board meeting the other day, and we were talking about their collaboration and how they work with you, because they're there to help talk through with the buyers side of it, and they work closely with you guys, but they are trying to formulate a plan that could work anywhere around the country to close down brothels. So I think it's fascinating because, and this also happened when I talked to the stem cell group that we're working with, Hope Bioscience. It's not just about saving your community. It's creating this system, this process that can be duplicated and taken otherwise. That's what truly changes the world. Right. And you're such a big thinker to do this. I mean, it's incredible the way you're changing so many lives. So tell about the conversation you and Jonna had.
In regards to forensic interviewing?
Yes.
Oh man. So taking a step back, adult forensic interviewing is very new. And I'll kind of talk about what that is as I go through this. But gosh, it was August of 2019. So it's been a minute. Jonna and I were at
it's been a minute, exactly.
Feels like an eternity ago. Gosh. So it was August of 2019. John and I were on scene, and we were just kind of dreaming. We had a whole bunch of community partners around us. We were kind of dreaming about, like, how do we make the world a better place? How do we save the world? That's kind of always our mantra. And so we're like sitting there talking. I was like, I want a victim service center for adults, so just like the CAC, so that patients don't have to go here and then go there and then go here and then go there. One day I'll have that. I really think we should be co-located. I think all those things should happen. And Jonna says, oh yeah, we need to have adult forensic interviews. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. That would be amazing. And so anyway, life goes on. We move forward a couple months. January of 2020 comes around and Jonna calls. Always take Jonna calls.
Exactly. You're like, gotta get this one.
So I remember she called and she's like, hey, remember we had that conversation? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, do you want to do it?
You're like,
and I was like, well, yeah, sure. And she's like, well, we have some grant funds that I need to move around and and we want to, help launch this program and see what the outcomes are. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but that's fine. I'll figure it out. So anyway, we went down this path of figuring out, what does this look like? How are we going to run it? Like, what are all the things? And of course, in the midst of this, COVID hits.
Yes.
So all training stopped. So we had to get like a group of some specialized people who really understood interviewing to do like a one-on-one like virtual training as our girls' first training, because we couldn't get any kind of training, and here I am supposed to launch this program, and it was so crazy.
Chaos.
Yes, but anyway, we in June of 2020 launched what we call our adult forensic interviewing program, and essentially what it is it's just like a child forensic interview for anybody that's kind of familiar with that process, but it really is a safe place for a victim to share what happened to them. It is conducted by currently 2 ladies we're hiring right now. We're going to have a third, but a group of ladies who have a background in victim services. They understand trauma. They understand what trauma does to the brain. They understand all of those dynamics, and so they can have these conversations with these. We do these interviews for men too, but most of our interviews are conducted on women, and it's recorded. It's audio and video recorded, so that way when the DA's office ADA changes because they move around, or the LE partner changes because they move around, they don't have to call the victim again and ask all the same questions. They can watch the video and feel like they're really kind of understand all the things that are going on with that case. So it prevents that re-victimization of that victim having to kind of share that story over and over again. And it really is done in collaboration with law enforcement. So law enforcement they're still there. They're still watching the interview while it's happening. They're able to provide input and ask this question or that question or whatever. So it's a really good way for us to kind of continue to build that collaboration and teamwork between partners, but mostly focusing on the victim, giving them a safe space to share whatever they want to share with us.
I just know, even with my daughter's medical journey, just rehashing all of anything that's emotional and difficult to rehash over and over, I just think it just causes so much more trauma.
Yeah.
And
when you forget details too, not because you're hiding them, but it's just like you've told us 10 times.
Yeah, mechanism. You can only say it so many times.
Right.
You can only live it again without having to feel all that emotion. So, God, we've talked about so many different things. Is there anything that you want to share about that's coming up that's exciting? Are there any fundraisers that you're doing? Is there any outreach that you want to share about?
We don't have anything else planned as far as like outreach and fundraisers. We do outreach every day. We do a lot of that with our partners and all of that. So that's kind of an ongoing thing for us. I think our biggest things are our expansion projects. We're hiring again. We're growing in our AFI programs. So that's very exciting.
It's hard to find nurses now. There's such a shortage of nurses.
Yeah, we have a new nurse starting in a couple weeks, so we're really excited about that. So currently right now we have 13 full-time forensic nurses on staff. So it's a big group. We're covering a lot of geography. We're doing a lot of exams in this community. And then
Tell us some of the numbers, how you've grown, because I think that's so impressive.
In 2019, I think we did, I want to say 359 exams. That was from March to December, so it wasn't quite a full year. And then in 2022, I have to continue to think about what year we're in.
I know.
I'm sorry.
I think of everything in relation to COVID.
I know. It's really crazy. So in 2022, we closed out at 1,754, I think. But we're on trajectory currently to probably, depending on what happens in the next few months, I think we'll end up at like 22 to 2,500. We're going to see a significant increase, not only because of our expansion, but just in this area. Our exams have grown significantly this year so far. And I don't know if are people seeking exams because they know where to go and they know why that's important, or is the crime increasing, or I don't know why that is. But our average exams, we used to do like kind of between 150-ish. But our average now is like 165. So we've really grown even this year, just like in this region. So we're busy.
And where do you get your funding? Does some of it come from the government? Does the hospital pay for some of your services? Does the DA's office have some there?
So lots of pots. And I feel like that was really important for me as, a CEO of a nonprofit, is to make sure that we had lots of different arms of funding.
Right. And so much changes.
Lots of changes. So I really want to really make sure everything's kind of like one thing ending won't hopefully devastate us.
Right.
So the first and foremost, we've had foundation funding in the past. Like George Foundation has helped with some of our startup funding the first few years. They were amazing to us. VOCA, the Victims of Crime Act, we've been a recipient of the VOCA grant every year since we've launched. We are able to bill for sexual assault exams. So the Office of Attorney General it's part of the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. There's actually funding specifically for sexual assault exams, not domestic violence or anything, some of those other things that we do, but sexual assault exams. So we're able to bill for some of that. And then, yes, our hospital partners pay us a per patient rate. It's fairly low per patient rate, just to help us with some of the funding that obviously the CVC fund's not going to cover. And then we're very generous, or very lucky that Kim Ogg was very generous and helps us fund the AFI program through bond forfeiture funds. Last year and this year, she helped fund the adult forensic interviewing program. So we're really thankful for that.
She's so connected to victims of violence and trafficking. I feel like she really hears it, sees it, receives it, and does something about it.
Well, Jonna kind of pitched the idea to her, and she's been really supportive of the program. So it's been fun to kind of share that growth with the DA's office, and Harris County, started it, but they're generous enough to allow all this region to use it. So Fort Bend uses it, Montgomery County uses it, Galveston uses it. So it's been really. I'm very thankful for that funding, because it's a whole new thing, so people don't really, it's hard to understand, so it's hard to get kind of funding for that kind of specific thing. So we're very lucky to have that.
And then you receive funds from individuals, and I wanted to share that it could be as small as $50 to give a victim of domestic violence, trafficking, a phone, because a lot of them are turning their phone over to the police, or they have to leave with nothing. Or $50 for an Alto ride. Alto, thank you for reaching out. There might be a new collaboration there, but there's opportunities. Just even giving $50 can make a difference. And I think that's can show people that if they feel compassionate about this journey. And you have a website, you have social media, share some of those.
So we're on social, we're on Facebook at the Forensic Center.
The Forensic
Center.
Okay.
Same as Instagram. Those are we're probably most active on those two. We do have a website, and you can get us at either txfne.com or the Forensic Center. We'll get you to our website. And we do have a donate button on our website. But the things that sounds crazy, but the things that don't get funded are things like medications. Nobody funds those types of things. So the money that we receive from the hospital helps pay for some of those things that aren't paid for elsewhere. So that would be one of those things. So things like that, any type of donation helps with those kind of random things, like a phone when their phone gets taken away, the Uber ride, maybe the clothing. They need clothing. They need, things.
So if you're out there and you work for Verizon or AT&T or any of those, you could give us phones for that too. So just keep that in mind. If you know people that could do that.
Absolutely.
And the last thing that I'll say, unless you have more things to share, is I'm just constantly surprised that this is not just one socioeconomic group. It could be people from anywhere, any group. I was most surprised to find that people in retirement communities, what are they called? Retirement homes? Are sexually assaulted in the homes, and that's a big percentage of
It's not a big it's not a big percentage. Okay. It is someone that we have seen.
You have seen. Okay, good. Well, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
But then the age span surprised me. You said you go as young as 8 years old, I believe you were.
Oh, no. We go, our youngest patient's been 1 month old. And our oldest patient has been in their 90s. I feel like 94. So it's a very, very wide age range. Birth till death is what we say. And it is all across the lifespan, all across the socioeconomical kind of spectrum. It can happen. These things happen to all people, you know. Yes. So I think that's an important thing that you kind of touched on, because it's not just one group of people that this type of stuff happens to. So we have to make sure we're talking to our kids. We are listening to our children. We're putting them in safe environments. We know we know where they are. We know where they're going. We know who's around them. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to say.
I'm so appreciative. We could talk for hours.
Yes.
But we will wrap up. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your heart with our community.
Absolutely.
And for sharing your dreams. Your dreams change people's lives.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Until next week, live the authentic life. Bye.